Charlie is a best-selling author and teacher of lucid dreaming and shadow integration. In 2008, he was authorized to teach by the Kagyu School of Tibetan Buddhism and has since developed a holistic approach to dream work called Mindfulness of Dream and Sleep. Charlie has written 3 books which have been published in 13 languages, delivered workshops in more than 20 countries, and been named as one of the next generation of meditation teachers. He has spoken on lucid dreaming at Cambridge University, Buddhism and youth culture at the Houses of Parliament, and is a regular panelist for The Guardian. In 2018, he was awarded a Churchill Fellowship Grant to research mindfulness-based PTSD treatment and continues to teach on retreats for armed forces veterans. You can keep up to date with Charlie's work on his website, www.charliemorley.com. So let's have a huge warm welcome for Charlie, and let's get started.
Thank you. I wonder why it's always so slightly embarrassing to hear your biog read out. It never gets any easier. I think it's because I know that you know I wrote it. So all the good things, you know that I wrote it. No one gets anyone else to write their own biogs. You write your own. You write it in third person, so it makes you seem better. Constantly embarrassing. Okay, so pleasure to be here. I haven't been at the other 2 talks, but I heard they were really, really good. So thank you to the other speakers. My aim is to prevent you from falling asleep for the next couple of hours. But of course, if you do fall asleep in this lecture, it's a great compliment. You love lucid dreaming so much, you're getting into the state and having your lucid dreams. I did a talk once at this music festival called Secret Garden Party, which is, some people are nodding, it's a pretty druggy Secret Garden Party, it's pretty far out. And they gave me the graveyard shift of 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and I was like, who the fuck's going to be at my talk at 10 a.m.? But actually, loads of people, but they're all zombies who hadn't slept for the night before. And I go on stage and I start talking about lucid dreaming and consciousness and stuff, and then of course the zombies walk in, and one of them literally falls asleep in the middle of this talk. And I got the whole crowd to go, no, you are dreaming, wake up in your dreams. And the guy then wakes up and freaks, what the fuck? It was such a brilliant moment. Highlight of my career, freaking out someone on drugs. But seriously. Okay, PowerPoints. I hardly ever do these because, I don't know, it just feels so corporate. But PowerPoints are good, especially when you've got a massive screen. So what we're going to do, this first slide, is cover the basics, what lucid dreaming is, why you might want to do it, how it works, and crucially, today we're looking at the psychology of lucid dreaming. So the psychological benefits of lucid dreaming. Why would you want to do this? What benefit could lucid dreaming possibly have to your life and your psychological health? My answer is loads and loads of things. And I want to give you anecdotal reports as well as scientific studies that will hopefully prove that. So what is a lucid dream? This is the interactive bit. Who's got a nice definition? Having autonomy, being able to influence the dream on purpose with intention, absolutely. Anything to add to that? No, because it's a pretty good definition, yeah. So, a lucid dream is a dream where you are actively aware of the fact you're dreaming as the dream is happening. So it's not just a really vivid dream. You'd be mistaken for thinking it is, though, because of the term lucid. The term lucid connotes clarity, clear seeing, something that was seen through light. Whereas actually that's not what defines a lucid experience. The definition of lucidity from a psychological point of view is the activation of self-reflective awareness within the seemingly unconscious dream state. The awakening of reactivation of self-reflective awareness within the seemingly unconscious dream state. So basically you're sound asleep, but you go, oh, I'm aware that I'm sound asleep. I'm aware that I'm dreaming. Oh, I've broken the thing. That is not accompanied by awakening. So you're not like half awake, half asleep. It's not in the hypnagogic state. It's not a shamanic journey. It's not an out-of-body experience. You're in REM dreaming sleep, rapid eye movement dreaming sleep. Anyone who knows anything about REM, someone in REM looks like this. You have muscular paralysis, very little movement. You're kind of out for the count, right? So it's not a kind of half awake, half asleep state. You're absolutely sleeping. And that's why, for many years, lucid dreaming wasn't accepted by mainstream scientific community because they said it was a paradox. How can you be both unconscious in REM dreaming sleep and conscious of the fact at the same time? It's impossible. Neurologically, it's impossible. No. We now know neurologically it's absolutely possible, and I'll show you the kind of the brain stuff a little bit later. So we know what it is. It's a dream where you know that you're dreaming as the dream is happening. How does it work? It can be spontaneous. A lot of people have spontaneous lucid dreams where you're in the dream and something in the dream lets you know that you're dreaming. So it might be like a dead relative, or you might be back at school when you're an adult. Hang on, what the hell am I doing back here? Oh, I must be dreaming. Who here has had the experience of spontaneous lucidity in a dream before? Okay, brilliant. For those who didn't raise their hand, or maybe for those who did too, who here has had an experience of being in a nightmare, and in the nightmare going, I've got to wake up, I've got to wake up? Anyone had that? Okay, that was also a lucid dream. Over a third of spontaneous lucid dreams in scientific reports have started as nightmares or anxiety dreams. Why is this? Simply because fear boosts our awareness. If you're in a dream with low level of awareness and something really scary happens, you go, I'm now more aware. And with that awareness, I'm more likely to see, hang on, how the hell did I get to a zombie apocalypse? Oh, I must be in a dream. Now, a little footnote here, this is a different talk, this is about the shadow work and stuff like that, but if you are ever lucky enough to become lucid in a nightmare, don't wake up. Every time you wake yourself from a nightmare, the psychological trauma, or simply the psychological energy that has led to the nightmare remains unintegrated. My best advice to you is, if you become lucid in a nightmare, as Krishnamurti said, the seeing is the doing. Simply stay in the nightmare knowing that it is simply a nightmare. That in itself can have life-changing results. My work with veterans over the last few years has been helping some of them to get to this stage. Because when you're having a PTSD flashback or PTSD nightmare that you're back in Iraq, the brain doesn't act like you're dreaming you're back in Iraq. The brain acts like you are back in Iraq. And actually these men and women will often wake up sweating, not sweating because they were so scared, but sweating because it was hot in Iraq when the thing occurred, when the incident occurred. I mean, amazing how the body responds to trauma if it's deeply ingrained PTSD trauma. So for these people, if you can train them to know, I'm not really back in Iraq in the traumatic experience, I'm dreaming I'm back in Iraq, that can be enough in itself to pick up the needle on the stuck record that is PTSD nightmares and allow the record to spin, allow the integration to occur. Because nightmares are good news. We don't want to not have nightmares. Nightmares are a sign of a healing mind. They're a sign of integration. But with PTSD, that kind of helpful system within the brain gets stuck. It becomes dysregulated. So we continue having these nightmares and eventually become re-traumatized by the nightmare itself.
Sometimes it happens before it happens.
Say again?
Sometimes you have horrible dreams before something serious happens.
A prophetic dream, absolutely. Yeah, that can very often happen. In 10 years of doing these talks and workshops, I've seen and heard far too many reports of prophetic dreams to discount them. I have no idea how they work, but it cannot possibly be hearsay. It must be a possibility, I just don't know how. What it is, how does it work, how does it feel? Lucid dreams feel very real. People who think that a lucid dream is going to be, you know, like in films when they do dream scenes, and they say, oh, someone's in a dream, they always have smoke, and they always go to soft focus. I'm like, that is the opposite of a lucid dream. If you really want to show how a lucid dream is, move from normal definition to super HD to show you're in a lucid dream, because that's what it's like. For example, and this isn't hyperbole, this is fact, the lucid dream for most people is an experience of hyperreality. Hyperreality, why? Because right now your experience of reality, mediated through the 5 sense organs, through the filter of the sixth, is limited by those sense organs. Your sense of sight. How far can you see? How deep into this color blue can you go? How deep into the touch of the table can you feel? When you taste in this reality, your taste is limited by your taste buds, which we know as we get older seem to decline. When people have a lucid dream and then they email me and say, God, I could see every color. I could see every detail on the carpet. How was that? I say, because you weren't seeing through your eyes, you were seeing through your mind. If you eat chocolate cake in a lucid dream, something that my wife loves to do, she's a brilliant lucid dreamer, but because she has so many lucid dreams, sometimes she doesn't always use them for kind of psychological stuff, she just has a little bit of fun. And she says, the chocolate cake you taste in a lucid dream is amazing. And of course it is, because you're not tasting through your taste buds, there's no limit. You're tasting through your mind. In fact, interesting study Jane Gackenbach did, very small scale, like about 5 women or something, but these 5 women in America were reporting that they were losing weight through lucid dreaming. She kind of questioned them on this, and what it was that eating chocolate cake in a lucid dream was so realistic that the brain was sending satiation signals to the gut saying, I'm full. So the next day they were less likely to engage in sugary snacks, leading to indirect weight loss. That's nuts, right? So lucid dreams feel really, really realistic. This is why lucid dream sex becomes so seductive, because the touch of the skin, an internally generated mindgasm, that's really something to experience. And in fact, that's how I got into lucid dreaming. Niall was asking me just outside, how do you get into lucid dreaming? And I think he was probably expecting me to say, I had a visitation from a Buddhist Lama and all this kind of stuff. No way. I was 15 years old. I'd been having lucid dreams when I was younger because I used to wet the bed a lot, and that used to kind of trigger me into lucidity when I was about 7 or 8. Then I was 15, started smoking loads of weed, getting into kind of drugs, interest in the mind, Shaolin Kung Fu, this kind of stuff. And then lucid dreaming just seemed like this brilliant way to have access to a virtual reality simulation of my own psychology in which the rules of society didn't apply. So I would become lucid and I'd just practice skateboarding. I got pretty good at skateboarding, actually. And the other thing I'd practice was the thing I wasn't doing in the waking state, which was having lots of sex. So I'd go into the lucid dream and, showing my age, I'd probably go, Pamela Anderson, come to me, or something like that. And I'd have all, millennials are like, Pamela who? I'd have all this kind of sex and stuff. So I didn't get into lucid dreaming for any spiritual means at all. But then when I was 17, hence, due to the drugs, I had a really bad all drugs overdoses are bad, aren't they? But a particularly bad drugs overdose and really traumatic nightmares after that. Now I would realize that they're probably PTSD nightmares without doubt. 4 months of recurring nightmares every week at a specific time when the trauma occurred. And I had been learning lucid dreaming up to that point just for the sex and skateboarding stuff, but I remember in one of the books by Stephen LeBurge, it said you could use lucid dreaming to cure nightmares. And I remember I was doing my A-levels at the time. I was in the middle of a panic attack where I'd locked myself into a toilet cubicle at college. And I remember thinking, no, dude, this is something that's got to give. You have got to sort your mind out. And I remember thinking, well, if I go to the school nurse and tell her what's been going on, I'm going to get chucked out of college, or the people in white coats will turn up. And I thought, well, look, can you heal it yourself? Can you use this lucid dreaming thing? Can you actually take it seriously for once? And I did. And it took about 4 lucid dreams to do it. The first 3, I did become lucid in the recurring nightmare, but because it feels so realistic, it's easier said than done to say, stay in a nightmare. It felt as real as this, so I had to wake up. But the 4th one, I managed to get lucid, stay in the nightmare, and literally face my fear. And I know in the TED talk and everything I say you should embrace it and show it love. I was 17, so I didn't. I just went, fuck off, I see you, I get it. But it was important, it was empowering. I was saying, I see that you're a dream. You are not psychosis, you are a dream. And I saw that. Oh, thank you. Is that great? Can I eat it? Thank you. Totally thrown me. It was a really good part of the story as well. Oh, I integrated my PTSD. Thanks, great. Yeah, so I did this thing. I turned to face the source of the nightmares, and the nightmares just stopped. 4 months of traumatic dream nightmares stopped overnight. And we found similar studies now when I've been working with the veterans, and the studies they've done on veteran communities and people with PTSD. It can take months to train someone to lucid dream, months. But once they have stabilized the lucid dreaming practice, it seems in many cases only 1 lucid dream, becoming lucid and traumatic nightmare, is needed to stop them happening again. So it's not an overnight cure, it takes months. But once you have learned, if someone can get lucid in a post-traumatic stress nightmare once and stay in there fully, be fully present, it seems to end the nightmares pretty much overnight. So how do we learn to induce them? I wrote some books about this, how to learn to induce them. So this talk, I'll probably give some tips right at the end of some lucid dreaming things you can do. But if you do want to learn, then I've got this book and this one about it too. Oops. This one about it too. Does anyone want to learn to lucid dream? Yeah. First hand I saw. Okay. Thank you. Essentially, most of the lucid dreaming techniques, so I teach the ones from Tibetan Buddhism. I lived in a Tibetan Buddhist center for almost 8 years and took refuge in the Tibetan Buddhist lineage when I was 19. So I've been pretty much steeped in that for the last decade or so. And a lot of the techniques I teach are within the Buddhist tradition, but a lot of them are the kind of Western ones too. And in fact, there is no Western and Tibetan techniques because the mind is the mind. The mind was the same mind 1,000 years ago in Himalayan Tibet as it is now. They're essentially self-hypnosis techniques, certain visualization practices, use of affirmation, use of the sleep cycle. So there's for example, Stephen LaBerge's famous technique, the mild method, mnemonic-induced lucid dream. You actually find almost exactly the same technique in a 16th century dream yoga manual quoted by the Dalai Lama. So there are so many of the Western techniques that you do actually find in the ancient Tibetan tradition. So use whichever work for you. But my point with this is that you can teach yourself to lucid dream. It is a learnable skill. I'm not a natural lucid dreamer. I taught myself. I taught myself young, so it might have been slightly easier to learn when I was a teenager because you have very long REM periods when you're a teenager, which is why you should allow your teenagers to sleep long if they can. Like school start times are terrible, really, really bad. If you can allow your teenager to sleep a bit longer. You can teach yourself how to do this. There will be some natural lucid dreamers in the audience, of course, but for those of you who think, I can't do it, I don't even remember my dreams, you absolutely can. I've worked with people with full dream blackout, and within maybe 2-3 months of training, they're having lucid dreams. So everyone can do this. It is a learnable skill. Okay, so we'll move a bit quickly through this. Lucid dreaming was first verified by Western science in 1975 at Hull University. The way they did it was, well, they had to prove something. The main argument against lucid dreaming was that how can you be sure they weren't just dreaming they had a lucid dream? Or how can you be sure they weren't having a micro-awakening, a very brief awakening in the night, then dropping back into the same dream, leading to the illusion that they were lucid in their dream? So they knew they had to prove several things. They had to prove they were still asleep. They hadn't had a micro-awakening, and they had to somehow work out how could you send a signal, a conscious signal, from the lucid dream state to the sleep laboratory without waking up. That was what they had to do. Insurmountable task, perhaps, until Keith Earn did it. He thought, okay, how can I send a signal from the lucid dream state? Maybe I can use fingers. So he put little switches on people's pinkies and said, when you're lucid in the dream and we're hooked up to the brain scanner and everything, move your pinky. And for some people it worked, but because there's muscular paralysis, it's quite difficult to do. He thought, okay, well, what isn't paralyzed in the lucid dream state? The respiratory system, we breathe, and the eyes. So he tried stuff with breathing, but the real breakthrough was with eye movements. Essentially, he said to the lucid dreamer, Alan Wolseley, okay, we're going to hook you up to the EEG equipment. When you're lucid in the dream, I want you to communicate with the outside world using your eyes. What they discovered was when someone's in a lucid dream, if they're like watching a tennis match, you'll see their eyes going tick, 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 because sometimes the eyeballs correspond to the physical activity you're watching or doing in the lucid dream. So he thought, okay, well, it can be like a kind of a Morse code. So once you get lucid, flick your eyes like 2 to the left, 2 to the right, 1 up, something like that, very distinct movements that couldn't be randomized. We'd then check these with an eye movement graph, and we would prove that you were in the dream state, you acknowledged the outside sleep laboratory and went, I'm going to send a signal to the sleep laboratory through my eyes. And they frickin' did it, and here's the proof. These are the eye movements there. This is in the Science Museum in London. These are the kind of the eye thing that he uses there. And for the book that I just gave to that lady, I interviewed Dr. Hearn for this. And he was so sweet. I said, so what was it like when you actually got those signals? And he said, in those films, Charlie, those space films, where you've got people from people in the NASA control room, and they have a signal from another world. I said, yeah. He went, it was like that, but it was from the inner world. And then he leant back in his chair kind of wistfully and he said, but you know what? In those films, people always give each other high fives, don't they, when that happens? I had no one to high five. I was by myself. And I leant over the table and I went, mate, high five. And he said, 35 years late, but thank you. He's a brilliant guy, brilliant hypnotherapist too, Keith Earn. He's still working as a hypnotherapist. So we had this proof. So that's important to know. This isn't non-scientific. It has been a scientifically verified phenomena of dreaming sleep since 1975. Then you had LaBerge, a few years later, at Stanford Sleep Laboratory. He did very similar experiments, but he got them peer-reviewed, he got them published in all the big journals. He made a kind of he made a lot of noise about it. So a lot of people think that Stephen LaBerge was the first to get the results, which I think it's important we acknowledge Dr. Keith Hearn was actually the first. But then LaBerge did brilliant work afterwards. Then we have a resurgence in lucid dreaming, just skipping forward a few decades. We have a resurgence in lucid dreaming research around 2009, 2010, which is also around the time films like Inception came out. And that was a really good time to be involved in lucid dreaming. They defined the definition more. So lucid dreaming is a hybrid state of consciousness with definable and measurable differences from the waking state and REM sleep. So now they start to use EEG machines, fMRI scanners, so they can see exactly what's happening to the brain when we get lucid. So 2012, once lucidity is attained, well, you can see what it says. I'll show you with my half a brain. I'm ready for any half the brain jokes you might have. Okay, basically, when you're in non-lucid dreaming, the back part of the brain, so the brain stem, the occipital lobe, lots of activation. Front part of the brain, frontal lobes, especially the prefrontal cortex, very little activation, almost entirely offline when you dream. Now, they believe that your sense of self, your sense of agency, your sense of I am having an experience are somehow located or activated within the prefrontal cortex. So, if that's offline when we dream, that explains how you can dream that you're a man if you're a woman, or you can dream that you're back at school if you're an adult, you can dream you're other people. Last year I had a dream I was the Queen of England. And such a vivid dream. I was her, she's a little bit shorter than me, a little bit wider, I was in a pink pastel dress, and there was a line of people in front of me, and I was doing the thing where I was greeting them. Now, I wasn't lucid. Now, in that dream, I was the Queen. I had always been the Queen. Charlie didn't exist. The Charlie program wasn't switched on. But the very creative parts of the brain were, so I truly believed I was the Queen. Then I woke up in the morning, the alarm went off. God, what a weird dream. I was dreaming I was the Queen. So I reached my phone, I write in my dream diary. Once I woke up, the prefrontal cortex switched back on. The alarm clock then switched that back on. So now the Charlie program came back online, and I knew it was just a dream. But in most of our dreams, because that bit is switched off, we think our dreams are real. Isn't that a weird thing? We actually think our dreams are real until we wake up and realize it was just a dream. Now, in a lucid dream, the same process occurs, but we stay asleep. So the back part of the brain, brainstem, occipital lobe, very activated, lots of dreaming happening here. Front part of the brain switched off, but because you've done your lucid dreaming training, or you've come to a workshop, or you've just had a spontaneous lucid dream, the front part of the brain switches on, and you see this in the brain scanner. In the fMRI scan, you see specifically the right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex become activated very quickly. And then they wake someone up straight afterwards, and they say, oh my God, I just had a lucid dream, did you get it? So they have a correlation between the subjective experience of lucidity and the activation of certain brain networks. So now we absolutely know it's for real. And the cool thing about that is that it led to a lot of scientific research into lucid dreaming, because they realized that once the prefrontal cortex is activated, a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity becomes engaged. Now, I'm sure we've all heard this before, right? Neuroplasticity, neurons that fire together, wire together. The more we use certain brain networks, the more blood flow they get, the deeper the grooves come into the brain. It's the biological basis of habit, essentially. Now, in a non-lucid dream, because the prefrontal cortex is disengaged, there's very little neuroplasticity occurring. But once the prefrontal cortex becomes activated, as it does with full lucidity, the brain lays down neural pathways in exactly the same way as if you are awake. The brain, in the lucid state, doesn't think you're lucid dreaming, it thinks you're awake, and will start to affect your brain chemistry as if you were doing it really, as if you were awake. So, they discovered through lucid dreaming you can actually get better at stuff. You can train in sports and get better at sports in the waking state. Motor skills improvement. So one of the studies they did was on squats. I'm going to tell you some amazing stuff you can do in the lucid dream. You can meet your inner child. You can call out to meet God. You can ask, what is my highest purpose? You can integrate past trauma. You can do your meditation practice. All these amazing things. But these German athletes who are called into this study, out of all the things they could have done, after their weeks and months of training, they're allowed to do one thing once they get lucid: squats. They check how many squats they can do in the daytime, go into lucid dream, practice doing squats, see how many you can do, check them the next day, long story short, they got better. They increased their personal best. Same studies using like press-ups and stuff like that. And one of the last studies, oh, here you go. So 1990, the studies began. They were just kind of anecdotal studies. 2011, lucid dreams have a great potential to be used by athletes as a training method. That 2008 one, I was part of that. That was a group of martial artists who could lucid dream. We had to go into the lucid dream state and practice a very specific kick sequence and then see if we could do it better the next day in the waking state. 80.3% reported waking state increase in martial arts performance. I embarrassingly was part of the 20% who didn't get any better, which is a bit embarrassing. But there's a cool picture of me, so that makes me feel better. Tomorrow's World. Do you remember Tomorrow's World? The older people will, maybe the younger people won't. Tomorrow's World is a brilliant show where they talked about, kind of futurism, really. It was probably about futurism. And they brought back Tomorrow's World, but now it's a kind of a online hub. And for one of their first episodes, they did one about lucid dreaming. So this is the one about lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming and martial arts training. In fact,